Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting challenging issues, fascinating people, and important events in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpartick. For many residents and visitors of our great region, the dunes and Lakeshore serve as a symbol of what Northwest Indiana represents. Their beauty is vastly known, and they are a hot destination for campers, hikers, bikers, swimmers, and tourists throughout the year. Many of us take for granted the work that is being done to maintain this, among other natural resources and region landmarks. Here today to fill us in on what region residents are doing to conserve our beautiful landscape is Nicole Barker, who is the Executive Director for Save the Dunes. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
I like the stripe thing. It's kind of just cool.
Thank you very much.
Hey, do you consider yourself an environmentalist?
That's a great question. I don't know that I've really ever thought about it that way. I guess I am. But having come from a background in municipal government before this, I've worn a lot of hats in the conservation arena. So I guess I'm a realistic environmentalist.
Okay, because I wanted to ask if you were an environmentalist, if you're a tree hugger.
I do like trees, and giving them a hug is fun.
So you do give them a hug?
Yeah, from time to time.
You would be the kind that would do that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think especially a good big old oak tree is the best kind of tree to hug.
So your husband, Steve, is also really kind of in the environmental arena.
He is. He's an ecologist that has spent 15 years working on natural resource efforts in the region.
Now, he's more than a tree hugger. He's a tree
beyond
mugger,
a tree.
probably, right?
He is, and a major outdoorsman.
So
yeah.
How'd you guys meet?
Oh,
This
boy.
probably has nothing to do with the show, but, I just have to ask this.
Well, I mentioned that I worked for the City of Chicago Department of Environment, and in my work, we would often think of the Calumet region as a bi-state area. And very often we would have things like the Calumet Summit that we had recently that would bring people together. I met Steve periodically at those events. He was a consultant, probably trying to get business from the City of Chicago. And I just kept saying, gosh, I got to remember that really nice guy with nice blue eyes. And eventually we met at a time when I was single, and he asked me on a date. And that was years ago, and we've been married now for over 3 years.
So the question really is who was really trying to get whose business here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess that's what it is. So you've been at this job now for how long?
Just over 3 years.
Okay, 3 years. And this used to be, there was a Save the Dunes Council, and it's now called Save the Dunes.
Right, there were two entities. Save the Dunes Council was a 501c4 that allowed the organization to do more lobbying, and there was Save the Dunes Conservation Fund, which is still our legal name right now, and the organizations merged. The Conservation Fund was doing more of the natural resource management, on the ground work, and the council was doing more advocacy, and we realized we could do it all under one roof.
So the Save the Dunes Council, though, is really a really old organization, correct?
That's right. Last year we had our 60th anniversary. We've been around a very, very long time. We're one of the oldest environmental groups in the state, in fact.
The story of Save the Dunes is probably a fairly long story, but it has a really interesting beginning. I mean, what created Save the Dunes Council 60 years ago?
Okay, so Saving the Dunes is such a long and storied history. I'd recommend reading Duel for the Dunes. It's a wonderful book if you want more context. But the effort to save the dunes actually started before our organization in the early 1900s with folks like Henry Chandler Coles, Jens Jensen, Chicago folks who were really geeked out on the ecology here. They eventually got the state park established, and then the World War intervened, and it wasn't until after that dunes lovers got back together and actually formed our organization to fight for a national park.
And the short version was that industry was just really growing out and was development was beginning to really consume the lakeshore. Yeah. And a group kind of said, stop, right?
Yeah, this was and it still is, one of the most globally biodiverse areas that we have left. It was so close to Chicago. People saw land being consumed, and they thought, we really need an opportunity to conserve some of this just for our own well-being, because it's a critical part of our being part of the planet and life is the relaxation and enjoyment that comes out of nature. And that was really at the heart of their mission.
How is it that Chicago has all this beautiful shoreline that's protected and in beaches and walkways, and we ended up with all the industry down here at this end of the lake?
Well, most of our elected officials in the earlier stages of the dunes battles weren't that excited about having a national park or having preservation. They really wanted the economic development along the lakefront, and with it would come big industry. Our organization's fight really was fighting the port and the mills in the Burns Harbor area, that was really what we were fighting against. And there's an amazing history of the tensions between the organizations that really went national. It was all over the national news on a regular basis, our battle. And we just thought that a national park and heavy industry weren't going to be great long-term pals. And that's part of what we still do today, is deal with the tensions between those conflicting land uses.
Did it ever get bloody?
I suspect it did. I haven't read anything to that effect, but it sure felt, when you read the stories, it sure feels like it could have gone there.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's ever been a huge love between industrialist people and real diehard environmental people. There's definitely this kind of smashing of heads, isn't there?
Yeah, I think at least in the past 20 years I've been working, I've seen it decreasing slightly in certain scenarios. My attitude is we're all part of the same region. We have to learn how to work together and collaborate when we can, and then disagree when we have to disagree. I mean, there are certain bills or things that we lobby for on occasion that the companies out here are not happy about. They're on the other side of the battle. We have those conversations, tell each other how we feel, and then we get back to talking about the great things we can get done together.
I want to come back to some of that real live tension in a moment, but it does seem like there's a better working relationship, at least here in Northwest Indiana. If you look along the Lakeshore, we can show project after project where business industry has worked with government and the environmental community to really create some great assets.
Huge assets.
What was the magic that made that begin to happen?
I mean, I think there's a constant spirit of wanting to make this region even better. And I think folks on the environmental side and folks on the business side have that in common. And I think that folks are increasingly trusting each other, looking for the best possible outcome. And I think people are starting to comprehend that benefiting the environment and thinking of things like the dunes as a major asset is important, not just because of natural resource protection, but because it does benefit our economy so much. Places like Portage, Riverwalk, and Lakefront are absolutely gorgeous. They're going to help people come to our region, spend time here, and enjoy nature.
You know, the environmental, when I first came here, it's been about 20 years, the environmental community seemed really substantial. And I could see some of these battles that have come from time to time, or some of these dialogues where people are on different sides. And you're going up against big industry. I mean, there's nothing bigger than the steel industry. There's nothing bigger than the oil industry. So that's huge muscle, that's huge money. So I kept thinking, wow, this environmental community must really be substantial in size or money. Is it?
Yeah, I think that it is, especially throughout this region. I found that there is so much passion in the environmental community in this area, and such a willingness on the individual's part to go to meetings, make their voices heard, write op-eds, get in the papers, talk to their elected officials. I think it's strong. It could always be stronger, and one of the things I spend time worrying a little bit about is the next generation, the 20-somethings, and how to engage them more effectively in our work, especially for an organization like ours that's been around for so long. That's been something that's very important to us, and recognizing too that they have very different perspectives on some of the issues than we do, and it takes a diversity of ages and backgrounds to come up with solutions to these problems.
So you talk about the passion of this group. Is it an army?
You know, I've never counted all of them. I mean, we have 600 active members and donors. We have well beyond that in our database of people who've been involved with us in the past, and you know, I think especially given the population dynamics in this region, there are a lot of people involved in groups like ours, Shirley Hines Land Trust, the Paddling Association that Dan Plath runs, and a lot of people like different bits of the environmental and conservation movement, and I feel we are pretty strong. We are an army, and I do feel like the elected officials here especially have strong relationships with us, and they like to hear our perspective.
It looks like there's a really strong core. You know, maybe it's that part of that 600 or something, but it does look like when the time comes, you can mobilize an army. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, we can, and I think also we're building a lot more partnerships with some of the other regional and then national organizations. So I think of our work on Enbridge and their tar sands pipeline through the region and our effort to protect water quality. There are other efforts relating to the tar sands issue that we're working with, National Wildlife Federation, the Alliance for the Great Lakes. There's a whole coalition of organizations around the Great Lakes called the Healing Our Waters Coalition. So it's at multiple levels that we can get our armies out. And I think that's really exciting and invigorating, being part of our regional discussion, but also centering our discussion in a framework that's beyond us.
That does look like a well-organized or very cooperative group, all those groups you name. You all look like you must go out drinking together or something. I mean, what's the story? I mean, it looks like you guys all know each other really well and work really well together.
I think having fun is a critical part of it, and
so you guys do go out drinking.
We drink beer together and maybe brew beer together and things like this. But people from the steel mills and stuff are also invited out with us. It's about really trying to authentically get to know each other and understand diverse perspectives, and in doing so, we can get more done.
Because you've got some great allies, from what I can tell, in the industrial side and in the business side and the government side around here. Mm-hmm. True?
Yes, absolutely. We've had great partnerships with a range of different companies. NIPSCO's been wonderful to work with. Like I said, we disagree with them on certain things, but what I like about their company is that they communicate very effectively with us and very regularly with us and very openly. So we're able to accomplish more because of that honesty.
So how does that work when somebody's on the exact opposite side of you? You see it as this, and you see it as X, and they see it as Y. Where does that conversation go, and when does that conversation happen?
Sometimes it will never go beyond the disagreement, but if you don't try to have the conversation, you can never find out if there's any middle ground that's agreeable. There are going to be certain projects and issues that Save the Dunes is never going to compromise on, and there are plenty that we will. And I think as long as others come to the table with that attitude and try to have the dialogue, at least try to have the dialogue, that's all we can do.
Do you convene those meetings? I mean, do you call and say, we need to get together and talk?
Yeah, sometimes we'll say, let's meet for lunch, let's talk about the latest rules that are being promulgated and what that means for your company, or let's get together and just talk about how we can collectively get some money to restore a wetland, or how are we going to get bikes on the South Shore train and who needs to be there in that discussion. Yeah, talking, getting together.
Likewise, do they convene those sometimes? Do they sometimes call up and say, Nicole, we need to get together and talk?
Yes.
Because you're irritating me to death?
Yes, they do. We've been pretty vocal about our concerns about Enbridge, for example, and we just went out to breakfast to talk about some really good things we can do together aside from our debate on the other issues.
So what won't you compromise on? You said there's some things we just won't compromise on.
Projects that will have a very detrimental impact to the ecosystem and natural resources of the Indiana Dunes. And when I say the Indiana Dunes, our baby is the national park and the state park that sits within it like a little island. Those are our greatest assets. Those are what we came into existence to protect. And while we understand there needs to be a balance between development and business and pollution and the park itself, we don't want to lose the biodiversity of our natural resources.
So it goes beyond the park, doesn't it? Because you guys were heavily involved in the whole issue with BP.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you get so involved with BP when the park's pretty much over? All the parks are really more over this way, although I realize they're spread all over the place.
Yeah, air blows.
Okay.
So it was more of an air issue relating to, it does have impacts here in the park. Air quality issues can favor invasive species that are really going to town right now on our natural resources. The nitrogen, sulfur, all those things can actually have a very negative impact on that ecosystem. And plants like BP that are so big and have such an impact well beyond our region, sometimes there's a business that we just need to be part of the dialogue because it is a behemoth.
I thought some of that was about what was going into being dumped into the lake.
Well, there's the wastewater permit issue, which is one issue, and then there's a $400 million settlement that came out of an air quality issue last year that was. So there's two separate major issues, one an air issue, one a water issue.
So how'd you become so knowledgeable about all this stuff?
Sometimes I don't feel that I am. I think I'm learning every day. And I went to school for these issues, but nothing teaches you especially at Save the Dunes, for the complete diversity of different subject matters you're going to have to address and expected to fully understand in any given year. So I try to remain humble and ask for help when I need it, talk to scientists, talk to people at government agencies, and just keep plowing forward.
So when you need help, who do you turn to?
Sometimes it'll be a professor, a scientist with the National Lakeshore. Sometimes it's a lawyer. I don't understand a legal issue in a certain way that could impact our natural resources. And sometimes it's someone at a company because I don't understand how a particular contaminant is removed from the waste stream. And sometimes it's my amazing staff because they have great knowledge on various subject matter.
Okay. What kind of tips can you give to the rest of the world right now who seems to be at each other's throats? You seem to be able to deal with really some pretty critical issues where people are on real different sides. And you seem to be able to reach some sort of agreement or compromise, or at least reach some conclusion when we got the rest of the country that can't even seem to talk to each other. What are you doing? What advice do you need to give to them?
I don't know if
Grow up?
Grow up? I don't know. The polarizing nature of things right now is heartbreaking for me because I'm the middle child who always wanted everybody to get along. And when we can't and when there's cruelty with each other, it breaks my heart. And so I guess I would say first try to be impeccable with your words when you speak to each other, even if you're saying something in conflict with one another, and try to have respect for people who have very divergent viewpoints as well. And then go drink some beer together and just see where you can take it.
This beer thing keeps coming back
Yeah, I'm a beer
over and
person.
over. I can tell you this is a beer person. What do you consider, at least maybe even looking back historically with the Save the Dunes organization, as one of the greatest successes?
Oh my gosh. Well, aside from establishing a national park,
Okay.
which was the greatest success, I think, of our organization's past years, there are just so many pieces. Adding pieces to the national park, I think, is some of our most proud work. There are dunes that are still being added to the National Lakeshore, or have been in past years. We're still out at tax sales picking up little pieces of land that are inside the boundary of the national park. Making it whole is one of our biggest objectives, and my predecessor and our board, past and present, has worked hard for that. And it's 15,000 acres, but we still only have about 90% of the land in the park owned by the National Park Service.
Do you feel like you guys have had any, what you would consider failures, just like we have not been able to make this happen?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, well, I don't know if they're failures yet. We haven't given up hope, but we really only have 2 major dunes left in the region that are exceptionally biodiverse and really great to preserve. One of them's Moon Valley in Michigan City, and I've been working since the day I got here practically to try to get this piece of land owned. And there have been lots of battles up and down trying to get funding, and we hope to find out by the end of the year if this is going to happen.
Who owns it?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that.
Oh, okay, all right. But a private party
Yeah,
or a
it's a private
business?
party.
Or okay.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get that into part of the
Just
park?
preserved. It's really a remnant dune, and it's exceptional.
Okay. So what's the other one?
It's a property called Fidel Dune, and it's out in Gary, and that's owned by a private individual too, and we hope one day to get it into the park.
Okay. So you don't see those as failures, but just still something you're still trying
We have to persevere.
accomplish. All right. So, environmentalists seem to get a bad rap sometimes. Just, you guys are, some of you environmental people are just over the edge. Is that deserved?
Sure. I'm good.
Okay, you've irritated a bunch of your
Yeah.
followers, right? No.
Yes, probably. Sure. I mean, on every side of every issue, there's always going to be someone who takes it to a level that isn't healthy. But I totally understand where they're coming from. I understand everything from people being completely radical in how they approach a problem to, much more passive. It kind of takes a diversity of all of us in all the ways we want to see an issue.
So what do you say to that person who's like just so fired up there in that radical stage, and they are really making it difficult for you to accomplish what you need to because they're just irritating everyone? What do you say to that person?
Well, I try to listen, and sometimes you have to hit the delete button too. And sometimes, I guess I could say that people, when they're extreme, when they're criticizing Save the Dunes for not being extreme enough, I try to say I really listen to them, and I internalize that and say, are we really doing things the right way? Is this person having a kernel of reason that I need to think about? And just try to respect them as much as I can, and that's not always possible.
It's tough. So Mark Reshkin talks about that you guys are involved in some projects like over in Valpo. You've really kind of stepped out of your area along the beach and come out. Why are you coming into these other areas, and what are you doing?
Well, the reason we're working in areas outside of the dunes itself is because the waterways, especially, we think of them as the veins that flow through our region. We only focus on waterways that connect to the dunes and to Lake Michigan, and all the land uses around all those waterways actually impact water quality in that area. So we have some great projects. We've been working especially with the city of Valparaiso on things like a giant water detention basin that we retrofitted to include habitat, allowing it to hang on to water as long as it can, and improving water quality. And we have lots of projects peppered throughout the region for that.
Okay, my last question of the show is, I was on a tour bus one day and a tour guide got on and you jumped up and kissed the guy right in front of 40 people. What was that about?
That was my husband, Steve.
Oh, sure. That's what you say, right?
Well, don't tell him I said that.
Okay, don't tell him. Listen, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate you. You've been a great guest.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Okay, Nicole. Tree hugger, green warrior, preservationist, eco-fascist, nature lover, all of these are terms, and there are more that are used to describe environmentalists. Some are kind of flattering, others are not. There are also degrees of being environmentally concerned, beginning with conscious or aware, then advocate, to zealot, and I'm not sure what we call those who are over the edge or all in. We need these people at all levels to help protect our environment. Yet there are others who occupy the other side of the issue. They believe progress has a cost, we can't protect everything, and mankind was meant to dominate. There are more positions and areas of thought. These two sides create a tension and form many questions about how we deal with the environment. In Chinese philosophy, the concept of yin and yang is used to describe how seemingly opposite or contrary forces are interconnected and interdependent in the natural world and give rise to each other as they interrelate to one another. I believe most of us recognize the need for this balance. We must continue to explore, grow, change, and improve, but we also must value and protect our natural assets. We seem to leave the struggle for balance with those who are extreme on one side or the other. We hope that the resolution will be in the best interest of all of us. I know some might argue that the environmental people are too strong and winning most of the battles. I believe for the past 100 years and the current momentum favors progress at the cost of the environment. If that's true, we need fighters on the environmental side to keep pushing their agenda for environmental protection and improvement. If the struggle becomes an issue of who is right and who is wrong, we're missing the basic tenet of yin and yang, where we look at the interconnected and interdependent needs of nature and people. I'm grateful for those who are battling for environmental causes. They bring balance to the equation. Whether you agree with me or not, I am one who thinks it's okay to hug a tree hugger. Thanks for watching Lakeshore Focus. Where do you stand on the environmental issues? And do you agree or disagree with my thoughts? We'd like to hear from you, so email us at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or reach us through our website, which is listed on your screen. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.